This is the template that you'll be receiving in my book, and I'm actually going to do a variation, and I'm going to let you download the template for free. So in my last video we showed a piece of 12 by 12 inch scrapbook cardstock being cut down in half and then folded in half from there. In this case I wanted to do it with a sheet of 8.5 by 11. So if you were to fold a sheet of 8.5 by 11 this way, you'd get 5.5 inches across. So that's what I've cut this sheet. It used to be an 8.5 by 11 sheet, and I've cut this width to be 5.5 and then folded that into 5.5. So that's how I get a 5.5 inch square. What I've got left over, I've cut into 1/4 inch strips on my trusty little Cricut Explorer. And this is the template that I'm going to be following. Basically, the outer square here is 5.5 inches, and this one here was like 4.5. So I get a 1/2 inch border all around. So what I'm going to end up with is the letter B in here, because the design that I'm going to be filling it with, I'm planning on keeping it all contained within the letter, so I'm not worried about it being a little tighter on the edges and a little smaller card overall in comparison to the letter A. Just a little variation just to keep things interesting. I never like to do the same thing twice, so that's what we're going to do today. So if you do happen to have a electronic die cutter like I do, I'm just going to give you some tips on how to release the strips from your mat, because it can be rather sticky. The one that I'm using right now is for cardstock. So there's two ways that I would go about doing this. One is to lift these edges and not pull. If you pull, you're going to create an unnatural curve in here. And so what I prefer to do is lift up the edges and using my needle tool, I'm just going to run this. And you see, I'm keeping my strips quite flat as I take it off the mat. Another way, and so then this way we're not getting any bends with our paper. Another way to do this is to actually flip this upside down and let the initial strips come off like that, and then just gently pry the mat up, leaving your strips as flat as possible. And then we have some strips that are ready for storage now. Okay, so I've got all my strips ready to go. They're already scored and pre-folded. So you're probably wondering, why does she have a crochet hook here next to my quilling needle? That's because I like the circumference of the crochet hook, which is a lot wider for curves like this, because the curves here are much larger than the coils that you would see when you're actually quilling. So because this area here is straight, obviously I'm not going to soften that, but I am going to soften here. And you see there's actually an area where it is somewhat straight right there before it starts to curve. So I'm just going to use my template and place my strip on top. Now see where that curve starts to happen is right about here, about the midway section between this whole strip here. So what I'm going to do is not soften the entire strip. If I were to soften this entire strip, then these areas here, these straight areas, would also be soft, and that's not what I want. I only want this area here to be round, right there. So I'm going to lay this strip on my finger and just gently rub back and forth using my crochet hook to get the curve I want. And the more you rub, of course, the more curve you're going to get into that. And once in a while, you know, just put it back and see if it matches up. And see where else do you need to curve to get the arc that you need. So that's about pretty much there. So just continue doing that for the rest of the letter B and join that corner just as I show in the letter A to get a seamless corner. So I don't know if you noticed what I just did, but because the curve is going to happen here and this part here is going to stay straight, I'm going to grip this side with this hand. Do you see? So I'm going to pick up from here so it stays straight, and I'm going to soften this area, which becomes there. Sometimes the fingers just know what the brain can't somehow express in words. So I hope you guys get what I'm talking about. So I know sometimes you might be tempted to just say, okay, that's good enough, I'm going to glue that. But in reality, when you get to gluing, you could force the curve to be where you want it to be. But this is, to me, a little too far off the mark, because I don't like to force strips when I'm gluing. When I'm gluing, I want to do as little coercion as I can. I want the strip to naturally go there as much as it can. It just makes gluing easier, I find, when you're fighting less with a piece of paper that might feel alive sometimes. I find it's easier to just tame the paper before you actually go to glue. Now at that point, I feel comfortable with gluing that. Watch how and why I tend to smear my glue in the letter A video, found in the link below. This time I'm filling the letter B with many small pre-made elements, so I've decided to use neutral pH adhesive by Line Co. It's thinner than Aleene's tacky adhesive, so it won't dry out as fast and develop a skin to get caught up underneath the strips. To make my roses, I tore an 11-inch strip in half, then half again. A torn end will make a smoother join when you're making a loose coil. This is how I tend to make my roses a little bit airier. I'll unravel it a little bit and re-ravel it, just to make it a bit more open. I love S-scrolls. They fill up spaces quickly and bring a sense of motion to any piece. To make an S-scroll, I tend to pre-soften one end, turn it over, and soften the opposite end. Press the tool against the end into your finger. Using your thumb, rub the end to make it catch around the needle tool. The friction is similar to rubbing dry glue off your finger. Continue rolling about halfway, then turn it around and repeat on the other end. This is a typical S-scroll. I prefer to unravel it to about the innermost coil, then recoil it by hand to make an open and airier coil. It's kind of more dynamic, like a conch shell. The middle section tends to get somewhat kinked, so I soften it up again to smoothen it all out. To make the leaves, I softened my strip. Determine how long you want the leaf to be, then fold and snip. Glue the two edges together. Okay, I finished quilling and now I'm ready to glue my top piece to the card. I've already adhered some double-sided tape to the back of this, and what I've done is peeled back just a portion of the wax and not all the way, just so that it sticks out a little bit on the edges here. And you might be wondering, why did she cut this in half diagonally? It's the original template, and that's because I'm going to use it as a guide for myself. So basically I'm going to line those corners up. Then I'm going to center my letter B and press down on that corner. Now I can remove the template and it's magically in the middle. Good luck with yours. I can't wait to see it.